just don't see this everywhere.
Who wouldn't be captivated by it?
Let me just wow you.
There's nowhere in the world we can't reach.
It was the most incredible experience.
His courage, his foresight, his thoroughness, one would like to emulate that.
I can't believe the depth of this humility and the depth of this modesty. I think that's the greatest lesson I've learned from him.
We believed he was worth following.
I would like to think of myself as a product that he would look back and be proud of.
He becomes like a father to me.
He taught me my most important political lessons.
He's got the stature, he's got the personality, he's got the presence.
I have the greatest of respect for Nelson Mandela.
From terrorist to peacemaker, from prisoner to president, Nelson Mandela gave his life to his people and the struggle against South Africa's racist system of apartheid. Under the banner of the African National Congress, he stood at the front of a movement and reached out to the world. Mandela appealed to our sense of justice. He made us want to do the right thing. Few people have been so inspiring to so many. The men and women who have turned his inspiration into action have their own stories to tell about how a man gave them the courage to forgive and the power to achieve the impossible. This is the man they call Madiba.
I went through a lot of anger with both my parents, where I felt, like these were your choices that you made. Why must this affect my life? And this is too much, to put onto a child. But hey, I was a South African child. It wasn't my parents' fault. What was at fault was the system we were living under.
The youngest daughter of Nelson and Winnie Mandela, Zinzi grew up without a father. While Mandela was in prison for 27 years, she kept his memory alive. When he refused an offer of release, she explained why to his people.
I delivered that message. And again, it was difficult to even get to that place emotionally, to let him go. Because it had been my dream from when I was a child to have my father home.
My father says, I cannot and will not give any undertaking at a time when I and you, the people, are not free. Your freedom and mine cannot be separated.
So it was so difficult to have to say, yes, I respect your decision and I wouldn't have it any other way. It was one of the most difficult things I had to do, but it was also something that I did with great pride.
The man's back with the aftermath of a psychopath.
I'm able to spend much more time with my children than I ever could with my father. I'm so glad that my children are able to learn to live as human beings in the current, political dispensation that we have, that there's much more freedom for them, that they've got the whole world before them that were completely shut off from us.
When Mandela was finally released in 1990, Zinzi was 31 years old and a parent. But she still longed for a father.
Vera was very happy to see my father and so on, but at the same time, I had to take a step back. And then I realized then that, and I said it to him, I've always hoped that you'd come back one day to be my father. And I realized that he actually came back to be, a father of a nation, and not just mine alone.
After 27 years without him, Zinzi had to share her father with a country whose needs were greater than her own.
My father's most passionate thing where children are involved is education, education, education. And in my father's words, he says that the soul of a society is reflected in the way that that society treats its children. I'm also an African mother and an African child. And we grow up, we are taught that every child is my child. That goes beyond your own biological offspring.
They call them the Born Frees, the children of the new South Africa. What Mandela couldn't do for his own children, he does for them. The Mandela Children's Fund is committed to nurturing disadvantaged youth. Zinzi helps manage the charity.
We need to have resources. Let's play around with the resources so that we can actually make a clear career pathing out of it.
These children have gone out of their way. They've taken themselves off the streets. And it's always easier to work with people who are already self-empowered, who are determined to make a difference in their own lives. I will support my father in whatever way in keeping his legacy alive, because I think that's the least I could do as a daughter, to make sure that his name lives on with dignity.
The name of Nelson Mandela is synonymous with the African National Congress, the ANC. It was within this political family that he became a legendary leader in the black struggle for freedom. In 1941, Nelson Mandela was recruited into the African National Congress by Walter Sisulu, a man who would become his mentor and closest advisor. Sisulu found Mandela work as a legal clerk and funding for law school. It was hard for Mandela to concentrate on his studies. He was drawn to the struggle against apartheid. But Sisulu made him see the power of an education. In 1952, at the age of 34, Mandela opened South Africa's first black law firm to defend his people.
I have always related to him like the other parent, because we have very close family relations.
Lindiwe is Walter Sisulu's daughter. She was 10 years old when her father and Mandela were sentenced to life in prison. When they were finally released 27 years later, she wanted vengeance.
I remember the first conference that we had as the ANC in 1991, and we just come from the trenches, most of us from MK. Quite despondent, because we had hoped that we would march down Pretoria in our camouflage uniform. And here was Madiba trying to explain to us why we needed to think of things differently. And it took a lot of persuasion. But in the 3 days that we held the conference, we were quite certain that we were moving in the direction, because he was there at the helm. And he had managed to convince us that this was the right way. In his hands, we were safe. In his hands, he would lead us to where we wanted to go. And we trusted him completely. I remembered him as this uncle of mine who always had a smiling face, always laughing, always fun to be with. And that's a lasting picture I had of him. When he came out of prison, I wanted to see that face. But I saw a very serious face, a face that had the responsibility of the world on his shoulder.
Under South Africa's system of apartheid, racial segregation had denied generations of blacks proper education, housing, or health care. In 1994, South Africa elected Mandela to lead them out of their misery. Lindiwe served in his cabinet.
I wanted him to be proud of me. I'd grown up, and he was just this towering figure of strength, a colossus. I was very proud of him. And the only thing that I could do was make him as proud of me as I was of him. When I was appointed Minister of Housing, I actually began to understand the value and the depth of the Freedom Charter.
A manifesto written by the ANC 40 years ago, the Freedom Charter, became the foundation for South Africa's first democratic government.
Most of the things that we're striving for have already been worked out. All we need to do is go back to the document and look at what the people of South Africa had wanted for themselves.
As South Africa's housing minister, Linda Way oversees new developments. Since being elected, the ANC has built 2 million homes.
This is a beautiful garden. Who did it for you?
And myself.
You did it yourself?
Myself.
Yeah, I don't believe this.
You have to believe me.
Every garden was like this?
Yeah.
This is for every resident?
For everybody, yeah.
Okay.
For everybody.
No, you've got enough space, Patricia, to extend your house.
Yes, I have.
Go to the bank.
I'm lucky.
Yes, go to the bank, sit down with them and tell them that you have a family, a growing family, and you might want to extend your house.
Maybe Minister will help me to do that.
Yes, I could. I mean, I can see that you're a very responsible resident of this place. I could very easily do that. Patricia, thanks, Sissy.
Thank you so much.
Will
Give me
you...
a hug. I'm so honored to meet you.
Of course, Nelson would always remind us of, the role that my father played in his political education, in mentoring him. So it was an ever-present feature of his discussions with us. And primarily what he was putting across to us all the time was that he is a product of the people around him. He would, want us to understand the value of humility. That greatness is not about what people make themselves out to be, but what they impart to other people. I would like to think of myself as a product that he would look back and be proud of. If I could achieve that, my life's work would have been done.
When you see the difference between where they were and where they are, I mean, it is amazing, absolutely amazing.
In 1948, the National Party touted apartheid as a policy of separate development. But it was the most pervasive form of racism ever practiced. Apartheid laws dictated where non-whites could live, work, and travel. In the last century, millions of blacks were arrested under past laws. Those who resisted were suppressed. It was the apartheid government's ruthless repression of his people that fueled Nelson Mandela's lifelong quest for justice.
What I believed in when I was a young man, and even when I entered politics, was that we could bring justice to everybody in South Africa, to each and every South African, through the concept of nation states.
In 1989, F.W. de Klerk became the last white president of South Africa. With Nelson Mandela, he would bring an end to the racial segregation he so firmly believed in for most of his life.
The Zulus would have their own elected government governing themselves in their part of South Africa. And the Tswanas and the Sothos and the Vendas and the Xhosas, and also where my people could have the same. In the end, we ended at a place which was wrong, which was morally unjustifiable, where the concept of separate development has resulted in a minority dominating majority.
As the president of South Africa, F.W. de Klerk was committed to finding a political solution to the racial war that was plaguing his country. He met secretly with the man that his government had labeled a terrorist and sentenced to life in prison, Nelson Mandela.
He was brought to my office under the cover of darkness early in December 1989. We had a discussion once again, steering away from substance, talking more about history, sizing each other up. There was mutual acceptance of each other's integrity as a result of that first meeting.
6 months later, de Klerk released Mandela from prison and joined the ANC in a coalition government. 4 years later, Mandela became his successor.
When he was inducted in 1994, he took my hand and held it up, and we could show a united face, commitment to cooperate with each other, to the whole nation and to the whole world. And it wasn't just a show, it came from our hearts and our conviction. My interaction with Nelson Mandela, my friendship, the time when we were colleagues, has taught me the value of consultation, the value of frank and open discussions. More than ever before in my life, the value of properly listening to the other side, of trying to understand the concerns of your interlocutor. He never interrupted. And he went out of his way to understand our concerns. I firmly believe that we have learned some lessons in South Africa, which can be of value to the outside world.
They were hard lessons. Thousands of people lost their lives in the struggle for equality. In 1961, after 50 years of peaceful resistance, the African National Congress turned to violence. Nelson Mandela became Commander-in-Chief of Umkhonto weSizwe, also known as MK, Spear of the Nation, the ANC's armed wing. Within 2 decades, South Africa would be on the brink of civil war.
I don't remember a lot of my childhood, but the one thing that is very specific for me is the smell of tear gas when we were growing up.
Neo Mienga grew up in Soweto, where Mandela's armed struggle won the hearts and minds of the black youth.
She was a white English teacher who showed us a banned video of Nelson Mandela in 1961, just before he was arrested. And this was around the time that he had convinced the ANC that an armed military wing was necessary. And the video was of him making a justification for that and saying, this is not because we are bad people, but it's because we're responding to a bad system. And I watched this as a 13, 14-year-old and found it true. I found something about it to be true.
The Toy Toy, a song born in the ANC's training camps, became the battle cry of Mandela's foot soldiers. Freedom songs rang out at every march and barricade.
I think music was a unifying force for many people in the struggle, and it attracted those of us interested in music to the struggle. I come from a musical family. Everybody's a singer in my family. A lot of songs were written to celebrate the leaders of the movement that were not among the people because they were in exile or because they were on the island, on Robben Island. So I think it was, and I think a very clever political policy. To use freedom songs to educate the young people, to educate people like me about who these leaders were and what their names are and who we must remember, who we must celebrate. There was one, for example, that I learned that I loved, which went, Umandela utaihlo, when utaihlo, Umandela utaihlo mehlase. That, I think, celebrates the Nelson Mandela that was arguing for the establishing of an armed wing. So Nelson Mandela will set it up. He will set up this structure that will come and will attack the enemy. He became a mystical figure. He became, in some ways, almost a religious figure. And people were looking for a Messiah to rally behind.
In 1962, Mandela was the most feared black man in South Africa. He had gone underground and was waging war against the apartheid regime. Within a year, Mandela and other ANC leaders were caught and charged under the Sabotage Act. The state had enough evidence to hang them. On trial for his life, Mandela gave a speech from the dock that would inspire South Africa's next generation of leaders.
I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die.
The most powerful thing about the Rivonia speech was that when he made the speech, he had no idea whether he was going to be sentenced to death. You can sense it in the speech that it doesn't matter what happens to me, I'm going to say what needs to be said.
Like Mandela, Zaki is fighting for a cause he's willing to die for. Zaki has HIV, but in 1998, he refused treatment because for the majority of South Africans with AIDS, medical care is unaffordable.
Under apartheid, we fought for the dignity of black people. Now we're fighting for the life of black people. In South Africa today, there's an average of 900 deaths a day from AIDS. There's an average of 1,000 new HIV infections daily. There isn't another conflict globally that claims so many lives.
Zaki's stand put him at odds with his own party. Mandela's successor was denying that HIV required treatment.
I suffered enormous mental consternation when a friend of mine who is in cabinet came to me and said, I don't know, I don't understand the science, but I want to tell you that President Mbeki doesn't believe that HIV causes AIDS.
Zaki's refusal to take medication led to a phone call that changed everything.
I was very sick in bed, and my housemate came and said, "This is Nelson Mandela." And I thought he was joking. And then I heard Madiba's voice on the phone, "Zaki." I thought, oh, bugger. I thought, well, this is real. And he said, I am coming to visit you. I said, okay. And I said, why? I said, it's nice to hear from you. He said, I want you to take your medicines. I really think you need to take your medicines. And I said to him, Madiba, that's not how I do business. I said, we can talk. You're most welcome to visit any time, but you're not going to change my mind. This visit here to this place, to my home, was an enormous symbolic step. But he does an even more symbolic thing. A week before the ANC National Conference, he visits Kailicha, which is the only community-based antiretroviral program at that stage in the country. And by accident, he gets hold of an HIV-positive T-shirt, and he puts it on. The day he put on his T-shirt, this T-shirt, I said, I'm going to take my medicines. I didn't tell him that, but I knew. When he put on this T-shirt, I thought, well, now I don't need to die. I think his stand on HIV is what cemented him in my conscience permanently as a man of conscience and truth. Because when he fought the anti-apartheid struggle, he was standing on the shoulders of others who were great, some as great as he was. But when he took a position that flew directly in the face of the leadership of the ANC, particularly President Mbeki, he was standing alone. And he created the space for other people in the ANC to do the right thing. And that, for me, was a lot more courageous than everything he did before.
Nelson Mandela began serving a life sentence in 1964 after an apartheid court sentenced him and 7 other ANC leaders to life in prison for trying to overthrow the government. But it was from inside prison that Mandela would finally conquer his enemy. Sentenced to life in prison, Mandela and his colleagues were sent to Robben Island, South Africa's Alcatraz. A flat, rocky landmass, the island was reserved for political prisoners.
When I started on Robben Island, they tell us Mandela was a terrorist. And all the people here I seen as terrorists.
At 19, Christo Brand became Nelson Mandela's jailer. Nelson Mandela spent a third of his life in this 5 by 6 foot cell, sleeping on a concrete floor without a toilet or fresh water.
This is the first cell where I met Mandela. When I started here as a young prison warder, I don't found him as a person which was arrogant, aggressive. He was a friendly person, great friendly. Asked Mr. Brandt, where are you from? If there was a time when we could have talked. I said, no, I'm from Stanford area, Platland. Now explain. How's the family? You've got family? I said, no, I'm single. I'm not married at that stage. I don't have family, but I've got a mother and father. So, oh, that's good, that's good. Are you studying? That was his other words. Always want to know if somebody is studying. That's how I found Mandela, always a person to be helpful, even to his enemy, the prison warders. He tried to be helpful and to know a little bit more of us.
It was Mandela's kindness, his ability to reach out to his enemy, that transformed his jailer.
In 1986 or 85, during a motorcycle accident, we start becoming friends. We start helping me really to fight the court case against me for this accident. We become really friends.
Christo's loyalty to his new friend made him an ally in the struggle.
During the time when Mandela was in prison, we was also spying on him. We was also, sometimes I was bugged with microphones, and I always try to give him a tip. Mandela had a big influence on my life because he felt for me at the time when I was there, becomes like a father to me. He was so close to me that he helped my son with a scholarship. I said, no, Madiba. He said, no, Mr. Brandt, I will look after the child for you. I will help him till he can get his qualifications.
Christo Brand still works on Robben Island, but now it is a museum and tourist attraction. The island's transformation is symbolic of the new South Africa.
I think to work on Robben Island is very important to the world. Ex-prison guards, prison warders, working together with ex-prisoners. We don't hate each other today. We are friends.
For more than a quarter century, Mandela was locked away, separated from his people. In prison, the apartheid state tried to break him, but Mandela remained defiant.
He is a leader who leads from the front. Everything that he expects of his followers, he'll want to do.
Ahmed Kathrada was one of 7 Rivonia defendants sentenced to life in prison on Robben Island. He spent 27 years behind bars with Nelson Mandela.
He was called in by the authorities soon after we arrived on Robben Island and offered exemption from work. He refused all that. Again, that was an example of his leadership. He was not going to have anything that his fellows would not do. Whether it's polishing the floors, whether it's washing clothes, anything, pick and shovel work, he had to be there. Because he made it clear to us right from the beginning, we are now prisoners. We are equal.
On Robben Island, Mandela and his colleagues ran a mini-democracy. Decisions were made by the majority, but in 1985, that changed when Mandela was separated from his colleagues.
Instinctively, we wanted to protest. He then said, cool it. Not in those words, but he said, something may good come out of it. Already in retrospect, he was already thinking that the time has come to negotiate. As he subsequently told us, there comes a time when a leader has to lead. He deliberately did not want to consult with us.
Mandela began secret talks with the South African government to negotiate the release of his colleagues, the unbanning of the ANC, and ultimately the dismantling of apartheid.
As he suspected, there were two of us who were in favor, two were against. I was among the ones dead against the negotiation. Of course, in retrospect, I was wrong, and he was right. I thought that we are negotiating from a position of weakness, but the timing was so correct, otherwise the country was going to be plunged into a bloodshed, the like of which we would never see. There are many aspects of his life. His courage, his foresight, his thoroughness, one would like to emulate that.
Locked away, Nelson Mandela became the face of a nation's struggle for freedom. The ANC made him the most recognizable political prisoner in the world. Their campaign called for economic sanctions against the apartheid state. By the late 80s, South Africa was on the brink of bankruptcy.
Nelson Mandela will never get out. And I'll never forget that. 7 neurals said it to me, and I said, no, 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 he will. He will eventually, because I believe in the human spirit. Because people can move the rock. Even if it's the rock of Gibraltar, if you get enough people supporting an idea, then you can move that rock.
Howard States was a teacher in Toronto when Nelson Mandela was released from jail in 1990. He met him when Mandela made his first official visit to Canada as the President of South Africa.
The teachers, the staff, they got together and they made sure that their students were going to see a living icon. And because children are the ones we educate, so that they learn an injustice to someone, you should take it as if the injustice happened to you. But they have to be taught about Nelson Mandela, who embraces those ideas. And in this building right here, there is not probably a kid that does not know who Nelson Mandela is.
Do you know who I am? Yes! Who I am? Nelson Mandela. Oh, that's good.
3 years after his visit to Toronto, Nelson Mandela returned when Park Public School adopted his name.
There was people all over the place. People that couldn't get in were outside, wanting just to have a glimpse of him. And when he walked through the doors, he was moving like this. And I tell you, it was so much energy, and it was so beautiful. From that moment, everyone was thinking, how can we do something else here? And the beauty of it, they did do something about it.
I'm very excited. Actually, I can't even wait to go to Canada because it's my first trip overseas.
Njango Mazinda lives in Cape Town, South Africa. She is part of an exchange program started by the teachers at Nelson Mandela Park School in Toronto, Canada.
The school's name is Nelson Mandela Park Primary School, I think. The name is that. Maybe they saw how we struggled here in South Africa. It's not like they can feel what the people went through, but they know how we struggled to come to where we are now. I will sing my songs when I'm there. Then I'll tell them what it means. In the olden days, when we go higher, higher, higher with the black people, because the white people always want to be in power. So the Intombi means like I'm proud of my daughter for going there and fighting for her freedom. My great-great-grandma told me the stories. So actually the stories that they tell us, when I grow up I have to tell a person like my child, but they mustn't take it into their hearts because it's the past. The past has to remain the past. Not taken to hatred, must just get along together.
When Mandela was released from prison in 1990, he was faced with a different kind of struggle. After serving 27 years for inciting violence, he had to make peace. For decades, blacks and whites have been at war. Now Mandela had to bring the two sides together.
When he walked out with that rugby jersey, the crowd went mad.
In 1995, Chester Williams was the first black man to play for South Africa in the World Rugby Cup. It was here that Nelson Mandela used a sport, once a symbol of the apartheid regime, to unite a country.
Before they went to the field, I went into their dressing room and I told them that the whole country, black and white, was behind them. And they must go to the field fully motivated, knowing that they will bring glory to South Africa.
We just said there's no ways that we can lose this test or final for the country.
Chester began playing rugby as a teenager in the late 1980s. By then, an international sports boycott had pressured the apartheid government to modify its racist policies on the field. A handful of blacks were accepted to play on white rugby teams. Chester was one of those players.
When I was on the field, I could still hear the so-called Afrikaner or the white people. They still calling me names that the K-word or you don't belong here. And they never knew that actually motivated me to play better and better and better.
A star left winger, Chester was dubbed the Black Pearl by his fans. In post-apartheid South Africa, he used his talent to make history. In 1995, the Springboks won the Rugby World Cup.
They're very great. They'll say Bokke.
They look best.
I'm feeling very great, my friend, man. The new South Africa.
After winning the World Cup, Nelson Mandela honored the Springboks at a dinner.
He's such an amazing person. He just said to me, Chester, you know, be yourself and don't let anything change your attitude and your personality, because that's how you got successful. And he told me I'm still carrying the flag for the country out there and I must just continue doing it, and that's what I'm trying hard to do.
Now a coach, Chester's helping to bring more black players onto the field.
So we're never exposed to other people to see, but there's black people playing rugby, there's black people playing in the Springbok team. We didn't have that. If anything, whenever we toured, they took one black player with, just to almost make sure that people accept us to go and play there. And even now, you know, up till today, black people still struggle to get into teams. It's hard for them, but only because what happened in the past. Now, the younger guys, we're telling them now they do have an opportunity to be a Springbok or be a successful rugby player. And I think there's such a lot of potential in South Africa, growing-wise. If you had come here about 10 years ago or 13 years ago, it would have been a different country.
South Africa's new beginning was both a joyous and painful time. In 1994, Mandela could finally lead his people, but not without grieving the past. The inhumanity of apartheid was now being fully exposed, and the country wept. Nelson Mandela asked his people to do an extraordinary thing: to forgive.
I think in the heart of Mr. Mandela, there must be love. When he came out of prison, he did not have a record of wrongs done to him, because then he would have embarked on a road of revenge. And what did he do? He embarked immediately on a road of forgiveness.
From 1986 to 1991, Adrian Vlok was the apartheid government's Minister of Law and Order.
The situation in South Africa during the 80s was bad. it was a war. I was in charge of the police, and we were trying to deal with the violence, to restore law and order as good as was possible.
Hundreds of ANC activists were tortured and executed by police.
I think that the police thought it was okay to kill people. Because, you know, we praised them. And we even gave medals to them.
As the president of South Africa, Mandela offered amnesty in exchange for the truth. Anyone who confessed their sins would not be charged for their crimes. Adrian Block was the only apartheid minister to ask for amnesty.
I went before the Truth and Reconciliation Commission only after a long and hard thought and discussions, because many people advised me not to do that, because they said, look, but you were only doing your job. And I said, that may be so. But fact of the matter was, I broke the law. Apart from that, I studied the Bible, and I saw clearly from the Bible that if you want to be reconciled with your fellow human being, then you must be prepared to ask for forgiveness, to admit what you did, and then you can stand before the Lord, and you can also look your fellow human being in the eye.
Adrian Block's testimony was a watershed moment for South Africa. But for him, it was just the beginning on the road to forgiveness. Years later, he would do something unthinkable for a former apartheid minister. Adrian Block was the only apartheid minister to confess before South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But Mandela inspired him to do more than speak the truth. He knelt down before 10 mothers whose sons had been executed by his police force to wash their feet.
I was sitting there with my little bag and the skotteltjie and the 2 little towels, and I was asking the Lord, should I go or should I ask them? And when eventually the Lord led me to ask, they discussed it amongst themselves for about 5 minutes. And there was one lady, she was walking with a crutch, and whilst they were still talking and discussing the whole thing, she started removing her shoes and her socks. And that was the moment. And I cried, and she cried, and all of us cried. And it was an amazing moment. And then I knew that they are prepared to forgive me. There are still a lot of anger amongst the victims and families of the victims. I think that the time has come to go down to small acts of forgiveness and try to find reconciliation through smaller acts. Millions of smaller acts.
In 1994, South Africa holds its first democratic elections. The people choose Nelson Mandela as their president.
You know, you've got people really respect Mandela. Even people which hate him that years said, you can't believe that's a person which was in prison. With this big respect, he done a lot for the country. Honestly, he done a lot for us.
I think his greatest influence on me is how it is possible to embrace what appears to be violently contrasting opposites.
He is par excellence a peacemaker.
Mandela taught me my most important political lessons, and that is, no matter how angry you are, don't let the anger rule you.
Viva Mandela, viva! Viva! Viva Christiane, viva! Viva!
The way he led the country by example, you know, but no grudges against the whites or any other person that I know of.
We were angry, we were bitter, there were scores to settle and so on. But he managed to get us to understand, you know, the bigger picture.
20 years ago, if somebody had suggested that there'll be a peaceful transformation in South Africa, they'd say, you're mad. There was, without hatred, without bitterness, without feelings of revenge, with a message of reconciliation, forgiveness.
I think most of us tend to be so consumed by our own anger and our own bitterness and our own experiences that we forget that there is a world outside of ourselves, that we're not the definitive, we're not the beginning and the end. And he's taught me that.
It's not just his people, South Africans. He stands for the rights of everybody. And he makes it very clear we have to be more than just a black man. We also have to be human. And because we're human and we care about people's rights, then you have to fight for their rights.